phrase triumph of the Spirit calls to my mind something monumental, something big, especially in these days of an invisible killer virus and division among our country's people like I've never seen it in my lifetime. I'm looking for a spiritual triumph that is a size 3XL, not a size S. But what I've come to wonder is if all this looking for a triumph of the Spirit that is very large, if that might not be leading me to overlook the still small voice from which inner transformation comes and inner triumph of the Spirit, at least most of the time for most people. For myself right now, I know that the world is a dangerous place, that the virus is a very serious health risk, but in my own personal life, I'm dealing probably with nothing more consequential than being inconvenienced and a shortage of toilet paper. Although I know that many other people are dealing with much more serious and much more spiritually significant things. But for me, I'm looking for a triumph of the Spirit that fits my circumstances. And I think I may have found it in a haircut. A few weeks ago, I had an appointment with my cardiologist. I had some heart surgery earlier in the year, shortly before all this started, and went for a follow-up appointment with him. Everything was fine, but before I left, he said to me, "Is there anything else I can do for you?" And without thinking, I said, "Do you do haircuts?" From behind his mask and from behind my mask, we both laughed. That was something of a spiritual triumph because it made me realize that my dad joke sense of humor was still intact. But much more importantly came the actual haircut, which I needed desperately. And my son came to me and said, "Dad, would you like me to give you a haircut?" I never dreamed of asking one of my children to help do something so personal for me when I've spent a lifetime trying to do things for them. But I agreed, and he did a wonderful job. It's time for him to do it again. And that allowing my son to deliver a personal service in that way, a small thing, but allowing that to happen was a triumph of the Spirit in many ways. It made me realize his importance and my dependence.
The triumph of the Spirit. When I think of the triumph of the Spirit, I think of the human spirit having capacities beyond all our imagination, beyond anything our minds can think of. When I think of Spirit, this ultimate Spirit, to me it's God. It is, but not a God that's beyond all that we can imagine. It's God that's within us, God that is around us, available to us. It is this ultimate Spirit that we actually have access to. As a Unitarian Universalist, I believe this God is the Spirit of life and of love. I grew up as a Christian and believed that there was a three-part God, and the Holy Spirit was the third part that I didn't quite understand. To me, that is God. This Holy Spirit that is present in all of us, available to all of us. I think of it as the Holy Spirit that is God within each of us in the Quaker sense. And I call it the Spirit of life and of love. That is this ultimate Spirit. And when I think of its application, the triumph of the Spirit, I think of people who have survived in concentration camps in spite of all the physical degradation and destruction, but the Spirit has remained alive so they could be there for other people. I think of the triumph of the Spirit in terms of crises and what people do in disasters, beyond what would be expected. taking care of other people and doing heroic events. That is a spiritual triumph in my thought. I think of the triumph of the Spirit as hope in times of grief. Hope that has no basis or grounding in a physical reality, but hope is a spiritual triumph beyond all examples, all the things that you see around or feel. And I think as a final thing that the triumph of the Spirit is kind of our legacy, what we leave behind beyond the physical body when death occurs. The triumph of the Spirit is what's left in the world that we've touched, the way we have been for other people, the legacy we've left in their lives. Thank you.
Over the course of our life, we tend to measure our success or failure by the dollars in our bank account, our status in community, the accolades we receive. And we're out there listening for all of the support and the emphasis that tell us that we're succeeding or failing. When Elijah the prophet was looking for this sense of assurance, he was looking for God, and he didn't find God in the earthquake or the hurricane winds or in the fires. He found God in the kol damama, the still small voice. That connection between God and humanity that speaks to us in our very guts. And the reality is that it speaks to all of us because we're all human. We all come from the very same stuff. We were not created as doctors or ditch diggers, as criminals or bankers. We were all created human. And what happens to us according and along life's path tells us whether or not we are fulfilling our potential of healing the world. We're born to create miracles. The purpose for our existence is to do the miraculous in each other's lives. And oftentimes it takes overcoming all sorts of challenges to remember how essential we are to each other and how blessed we are to have each other. And especially at times like this with the pandemic and throughout all of the disasters that have plagued humanity, there have been those lights that have shined that have said, I know that there's all of this horrible stuff happening around the world, but I know I can make a difference. So I'm reminded of a story of a little boy on a seashore, and there's starfish all around him. And he's throwing them back into the ocean, and a man comes up to him and says, young man, what are you doing? You're wasting your time. And the little boy looks up and says, I'm saving starfish. And the man looks around, he says, there's thousands of here. You can't save all these starfish. The little boy picks one up, throws it into the water, and says, I saved that one. Each of us has the power to heal ourselves and someone else if we can only have faith enough to know that we matter and that each other matters. Success is measured when we can look into each other's eyes and see God staring back. Whatever our status, whatever our color, whatever our religion or gender or orientation, when you can look into another human's eyes and see God staring back, your spirit has triumphed. The soul is whole and the world can be made right. Let's take good care of each other. Let's cherish each other. Let's honor each other and let our souls be triumphant.
In the hope for the future, hope. That's the triumph. And these are triumphs of the Spirit. Hug a mug of joy.
Triumph of the Spirit. I'm walking in a desert. I'm walking alone.
The triumph of the Spirit.
I see nothing in front of me but the horizon and the blue sky. I'm joined by a Cherokee who's one of the people who ran the newspaper before they were sent on their journey on the Trail of Tears. I'm joined by a Japanese internee who started a school and an orchestra inside the internment camp. I'm joined by a Lebanese family who in their fallout shelter had musicians and ping pong tables and television sets because they never knew when the war was going to end. I'm joined by the Palestinian children living in Jabalia refugee camp when the Israeli missiles come in. I am joined by the Iraqis who even amidst an invasion can find time to make music, have weddings, and sing songs. These are the spirits that accompany me in the walk in the desert. the spirit of my grandmother, crawling through the brush, trying to buy food for her children during a famine. I am joined by the spirit of my grandfather on a boat in Brazil, trading rubber with the natives. I am joined by the spirit of my ancestors who broke through all the obstacles to put me here. This is the triumph of the spirit that I follow, and this is the triumph of the spirit I want to become.
It is peace. It is the love of peace. It is the love of beautiful things and the inner beauty of things. Triumph of the spirit is poetry.
My very gear is a shield against pointed projections. I love as many dead men as I do living. Triumph, my spirit. Trumpet, my soul. I meet myself and say, goodbye, self. Let me find spirit and triumph. Let me be spirit and triumph. My grandparents were displaced from the land of their bones and souls, which are trees, which bulldozers still raise. So raise up my spirit. Ah, yes, this is what the phoenix does. Molt, smoke, mount, combust, bust out, outdo, die again and again. This is the triumph of my spirit.
Violence, antagonism, conflict prevails, even within ourselves.
The triumph of the spirit is heart. The knowing, the ability, the consciousness to know what is right and what is wrong. It is not so much a human thing, but it is a human thing. It is a human thing because we are human and we're on this planet and we're trying to rise above ourselves and transcend, get to a place that is magic, that is full of mystery.